The day my husband was laid to rest, I stood in silence as they whispered about me like I wasn't even part of the family. My daughter-in-law angled me out of the family-only photo, and my son looked away as if I were a stranger. I said nothing, though in my purse lay proof of the $35 million inheritance, and another secret none of them suspected. What happened that night was only the beginning of a battle they thought I was too quiet to fight. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment, letting me know where you're watching from. The usher met me in the vestibule with a practiced smile and a stack of programs that still smelled of warm ink. He placed one in my palm as if passing a napkin. The cover read, Richard Allen Wake Order of Service, Dignity, Faith, Remembrance. Inside the names were neat, the font solemn, and the line that should have said, Wife Lorena Allen was replaced by guest coordinator. I felt the word wife drop through me like a coin down a well. I pressed the folded corner under my thumb and thanked the boy anyway. He nodded, not seeing the small rearrangement of my life on that page. I slid the program beside my clutch and kept walking. The vestibule smelled of wax and winter wool. I nodded and kept moving. I took the center aisle, but not the front pew, the one with tissues and a reserved sign. One row back, I could be present and still be useful. The wood was polished to a mirror. In that narrow strip, I arranged my face the way women my age have learned formal, usable, unsinkable. The photographer hovered near the altar, testing angles. Family, only he called. I rose on instinct. Carol's hand found my elbow, cool as the silver of her bracelet. Let them go first, she murmured, and pivoted me half a step out of the frame. The usher, trying to help, eased me to the side with two gentle fingers. I stepped back to a square of glare on the floor and held my breath, watching the space where I should have stood fill with someone's shoulder and someone else's smile. The photographer counted them down. I stood in my square of light and let the flash pass me. By the time we filed into the fellowship hall, casseroles had mustered like a small militia down one table. Pastor Marcia said grace. People ate grateful to have something to do with their hands. A digital board near the coffee urn scrolled memorial donors, Allen Consulting Staff, the Rotarians, Eric and Kirill, Allen white LED letters blinking like an airport gate. My phone buzzed. The bank app flashed a green banner ACH transfer completed from Lorena Allen Holdings, LLC Memorial Fund, First Zion Church. I turned the screen face down and pressed the pearl clasp at my throat until it clicked. I did not correct the board. I did not correct anyone. I let the coffee taste like scorched patience and moved along the line. The transfer had been scheduled already. The board kept rolling. I let it keep looking. The kitchen ran like an engine in the next room. I stacked plates by the sink because it gave me a job. The dishwasher hummed with the blank steadiness of a highway at night, a sound that swallows other sounds. Through the doorway, I could see the corner where the coffee pot steamed. Carol stood there, angled toward Lyle, her mouth moving in a whisper that clipped words down to shapes. Lacey's eyes met mine and then slid away, as if the floor had quietly tilted. Eric hovered between the hall and the counter, half in and half out of the conversation he should have owned. I dried a plate slow across the threshold line with my toe, then stepped back. I logged who looked away and who held my gaze. Steam pearled the glasses. Someone laughed about Richard's first toolkit. The sound thinned at the doorway. I dried my hands on a towel and gave myself the quiet talk I had practiced since hospice. I will not speak today about what sits behind the locked door of my accounts. I will say nothing about the building whose elevators know my name, but not theirs, or the fractional ownership of a midtown tower that rose like a long, steady tide and lifted everything quietly. I will not say $35 million out loud or beneficial owner or the attorney who will be unsurprised when I call. I touched the inside pocket of my jacket where my maiden name ID rested cool and thin and breathed until my voice belonged to me again. Words could be spent. I would not spend them. The vow sat where my ring once left a pale circle. The guests thinned the way light thins in November edges first. Someone carried out the last hydrangeas. The coffee tasted like something that had worked too hard. Condolences turned into logistics the way they always do. I squared the misprinted program on the counter until its corners made right angles. The room changed temperature. Carol came in with that bright, brittle smile women get when they are about to use it like a weapon. Family matters, she told the stragglers, and they took the hint. Eric drifted behind her. Lyle and Lacey flanked like counsel at a table I had paid for. I placed the program down so its edge aligned with the grout line, lifted my chin, and stepped across the doorway I had been guarding. The tile was cool under my shoes. A casserole lid clinked. Voices low. "We'll be quick," Carol said, as if time belonged to her. She took the head of the little tribunal as if the chair had been labeled. "There are practicalities we should address while everyone's here." Eric cleared his throat and studied the floor. Lacey smoothed a napkin flat the way you prepare for something to go wrong, but intend to look polite when it does. Lyle crossed his arms and leaned on the jamb like a deputy from a show we used to watch with Richard after supper. I let one breath in and one breath out. My voice did not need to be loud to be present. "All right," I said. "What is it you need?" Carol's smile widened a shade. "Pack a bag, Lorena. Pack a bag, Lorena." The words rang like cutlery on tile. For a breath, the kitchen held its posture. Then I answered the one word they did not expect. "Okay." Carol blinked hard enough to smudge her liner. The room recalibrated by tiny degrees, the hum of the dishwasher, the tick of the stove clock, the soft squeak of Lacey's napkin. Lyle's shoe tapped once and stopped. I straightened the program on the counter and waited. Agreement is not surrender. Sometimes it is a doorway. Outside the window, the last guests cross the lawn under the porch light. People tell you everything when they think you are finished. Kirill recovered first. She raised a manila folder neatly labeled. "Practicalities," she said. "The house is too big for one person. We found excellent assisted living options." Pamphlets slid across the counter, glossy with sunrooms and staged smiles. "Keys will be simpler if Eric holds the set for now. We'll arrange mail forwarding." Lyle took the doorway like a guard who likes the uniform more than the duty. Lacey smoothed a paper to keep her hands busy. Eric studied the grout as if answers were written there. I let the pamphlets rest under my palm. "Those are thoughtful," I said. My tone had no hooks. "Who paid for them?" No one answered. "There are wait lists," Carol added, nudging a hotel pen toward me. "If we start tonight, you'll be settled before winter really bites." The grandfather clock advanced one unhelpful minute. "It's only sensible," Lyle said. "You shouldn't be rattling around here alone." "I'll pack 2 suitcases," I said even and audible. "Clothes and papers. The rest can wait." Carol's smile faltered, unused to so little friction. "I'll go tonight." Lyle scoffed a sound he probably thought was private. "I'll need 10 minutes alone in the study," I added, "for Lamar's things." The name turned their heads. 10 minutes, Carol echoed, weighing appearances. "Fine. 10. I slid the pamphlets back into her folder and aligned the edges. "I won't take the cars or the safe. If you need my address, text." Lacey looked relieved, then ashamed of it. Eric finally spoke, angling for neutral. "Do you want help with the bags?" "No," I said. "But thank you." Courtesy feels like an heirloom when the rest of the china is divided in whispers. Upstairs, the house had the hush of a museum after hours. I opened the cedar closet and chose, like a woman changing seasons, 2 black dresses that work anywhere. Slacks that do not wrinkle the sweater with elbows I've mended twice. Underthings, nightgown, walking shoes, moisturizer that keeps its promises. Jewelry stayed where it slept in velvet trays. The gowns went untouched. The paintings watched and said nothing. I zipped one suitcase and set the other on the bed. Lamar and I ironed sheets on our first year. In the study, I set a timer for 10 minutes. Good stitches, straight, close, useful. I took the small leather folio from behind the tax binders. In the top drawer under the fountain pens lay a sealed envelope with my name in his hand. I slid it into the folio, unopened, sat in his chair, and let the timer run. When the phone chimed, I rolled both suitcases toward the back stairs, the ones that spare you the photographs in the front hall. At the side door, the night had the clean bite of early winter. The hedges made a corridor of dark. The gravel gave way under the wheels and sounded too loud. The porch light threw an honest circle that did not follow. In the second-floor window above the mudroom, Eric stood in profile, lit by a lamp that used to live in our den. He saw me. He lifted his hand, then pressed it to the glass, as if that counted more. I did not lift mine. I did not turn back. The gate latch remembered the way my palm fits. It opened without complaint. I loaded both suitcases into the trunk, smoothed the blanket Lamar kept there for picnics we stopped taking, and sat until my breath matched the metronome of the blinker. The house windows made a constellation I could name blindfolded. I named none of them tonight. White Plains was 10 minutes and a lifetime away. The budget hotel squatted behind a diner that never threw away a menu. The desk clerk looked up from a crossword and set down his pencil. "Name Lorena Morrison," I said, letting my maiden name be my raincoat. He typed, not caring whether that name had ever loved anyone. One night a week I said, "Quiet floor if you have one. No adjoining door." He nodded, slid a rate sheet across like a peace offering. I paid without asking about discounts. "Need anything else, paper and an envelope?" I said. He tore a sheet from a pad and handed it over with a pen that wrote more faithfully than most promises made today. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and the memory of other people. I set the suitcases by the wall and slid the chain into its track. I opened the folio and set Lamar's envelope on the desk. The flap lifted cleanly. His hand was steady. He wrote the way he planned, clear spare with white space where breath should go. He thanked me for making a hard year gentler and ended with one line, "See Barry at 10." I set my phone alarm for 10 a.m., wrote the time on hotel stationery, returned the letter to its sleeve, and slid the folio beneath the lamp. I lay on top of the coverlet purse, within reach the door in my line of sight. The hum air unit highway, a neighboring TV stacked like blankets. I slept at last. Barry's reception area smelled of lemon oil and old leather. I arrived 5 minutes early with a blank notebook and a steady pulse, the kind you earn after choosing breath over tears. Barry met me at the door, one palm warm at my elbow, and ushered me past shelves of red-spined reporters. Nora followed with a laptop and a box of tab dividers. We set ground rules, first facts, only no speculation, and absolutely no public theater. We build the record, Barry said. I capped my pen as if sealing the rule. We began with a ledger, not a speech. On a legal pad, we drew 4 columns, year tax source proof. I named each property and the year it came under my hand, the Westchester house held by Maple Row LLC, the brick building in Soho, 2 modest units in Yonkers that never made Christmas table conversation. Nora pulled prior bank statements color-coding wires from my account. We tie each payment to a document, she said. I initialed every line. The work was steady, honest, almost gentle. Before noon, we stood at the county clerk's counter beneath a brass clock that had ticked through other people's dramas. I requested certified copies, deeds, recording pages, reassessment notices. A clerk in a blue cardigan stamped each set, the rubber thud steady as a metronome. She glanced at the death certificate and softened. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said. I thanked her, kept my voice level, and slid the embossed seals into a manila folder. Old stamps tell their own story ink dates that do not wobble when grief does. The soft blue from 2009 sits beside a darker black from 2014, both witness payments no one toasted and repairs no one thanked. They speak without favor, and they do not forget even when people do. Back at Barry's, we spread the pages across a glass-topped conference table that reflected the fluorescent lights like a pond. Nora matched each receipt to a wire confirmation. Green highlighter arced from tax, due to TT Wire Morrison Capital. Where numbers disagreed by a few dollars, she flagged them, then found the stray county fee. Nothing contradicted what I had lived I paid. Lamar lived there. With every checkmark, something inside my spine lifted vertebra by vertebra posture, returning to memory. Confidence did not arrive as heat, but as alignment, one page under another until a picture appeared that did not need adjectives. Governance came next, the quiet layer families ignore until it speaks. Barry slid out minutes from Maple Row LLC naming me managing member, and an addendum noting Lamar's residence rights without ownership. We clipped agendas behind tax packets and labeled tabs, deeds, taxes, minutes. The binder rings closed with a clean metallic bite that sounded to me like a boundary becoming audible. "No need to predict their reaction," Barry said. "Just know what is true. Truth needs a record, not applause." After a quick sandwich, I walked 2 blocks to the assessor's office for copies of valuation letters. The hallway smelled of toner and winter coats. Another clerk pressed a raised seal that caught the light like a coin and slid the papers back with practiced kindness. She pointed to a margin note from a decade ago, my initials beside a square footage correction, and smiled as if the past had tapped me on the shoulder. I thanked her and stepped outside to let the wind clear my head. The day felt exact. By mid-afternoon, the table looked like a topography of my adult life. We cross-checked once more, then Nora drafted a 1-page chronology acquisition refinance transfer, each entry with a citation. She added a short list of anticipated questions for next week's reading. "What will you say if they push?" she asked. "Nothing beyond the facts," I answered. "Silence used well is a scalpel." We slipped the chronology behind the minutes the way order belongs behind authority, and Barry wrote a spare cover note chronology and supporting documents enclosed. No adjectives, no adverbs, just nouns, marching in order. I carried the stack to the hotel business center where the copier hummed like a patient animal. I chose a red binder because red is easy to find in a hurry. Deeds first, then taxes, then minutes each section capped with a bright, sticky note. On the spine, I typed, "Ownership and payments timeline." An older man at the next computer offered the weary smile of someone who has also made binders after a funeral. I smiled back. No confessions exchanged, solidarity noted. I added plastic sleeves to protect the seals and their raised edges. Time can smudge, plastic cannot. I slipped a slim notepad into the back flap for questions I preferred to ask rather than argue. I added a clear pocket for Lamar's note so that every time I opened the binder, the first thing I saw was his handwriting, not an invoice. In my room, I set 3 alarms, 9:0 for the banker's beneficial owner, confirmation 9:30 for the CPA's letter of record, and 10:15 for coffee strong enough to stand a spoon. I slid the binder into my suitcase and turned the latch until it clicked. Then I opened Lamar's envelope at last. Inside his handwriting, deliberate as always, and one line that steadied me. "If they forget the truth, let the records remember for you." I placed the letter behind the front cover and wrote a page titled, "What I Will Say and What I Will Decline to Say." Beneath it, I made 2 short columns. Under Say Dates, Amounts, Titles. Under Decline, Conjecture, Motive, Anyone's Tone. Dusk pooled against the window like a second curtain. I locked the door, checked it twice, and lay on top of the covers, facing the hinges, the way I learned to sleep when a house felt larger than the person in it. Tomorrow I expected 2 things: a brief email from Shannon with the confirmation and whatever storm might form when my family realized the paperwork could talk. I breathed in, breathed out, and let the heaters hum count the minutes toward morning. Prepared does not mean unhurt. It means ready. It steadied. At 9:04 a.m., my phone chimed once and settled. In the quiet of the hotel room, the screen showed Shannon's name and the kind of subject line bankers favor beneficial owner confirmation, Maple Row LLC. I sat up, smoothed the quilt, and opened the message. The PDF wore its confidence plainly letterhead at the top watermark, faint as breath timestamp, pinned to the minute. Halfway down the page, the sentence I needed rested as if it had always been there. Beneficial owner Lorena Morrison. I downloaded it, saved it with today's date, printed a copy downstairs, and set it square on the desk. At 9:12 a.m., a second chime. A cousin in Queens forwarded an email thread with only, "You should see this." I scrolled, then stopped. Carol had written after the reception bullet points under the heading Action Items, as if I were a broken appliance. Tour assisted living this week. Collect keys first thing. Clean the study before the widow returns. Lyle replied with notes about vans and boxes. Lacey calculated ongoing costs we can't carry. Eric did not object. He wrote, "Let's keep this practical. Move Mom before meetings, keep keys centralized, minimize friction." The words were tidy, professional, and meant to erase me. I did not answer. I forwarded the thread to counsel and wrote the time in my notebook. Barry picked up on the first ring. I put him on speaker and read subject lines and dates like coordinates. No confrontation, he said. Chain of custody. Export. Hash. Upload. Nora texted a secure link and a short checklist. Save the original .eml compute, a checksum record, a log entry, and do not CC a soul. Paper talks when people lie. Barry added not unkindly. The routine steadied me. I followed the steps exactly. Exported the file, copied the SHA 256 string into my notebook, took a photo of the headers from my index, then closed the laptop. I could taste metal at the back of my tongue, but my hands were steady. Shannon called next, warm and brisk. "You saw the confirmation I told her I had, and that I needed a physical original on letterhead for my binder. Courier before lunch," she said, and then from my notes read the key sentence out loud while I transcribed it exactly as printed. We cross-checked the sub-account's tax escrow capital reserve operating. She confirmed the same BO on each. I asked that all correspondence be addressed to my name alone. "Understood," she said. Before we hung up, she promised a duplicate by courier and stayed reachable. It felt like attaching a hinge to a door that had sagged. By late morning, I had Atif on the line. He is younger than Barry and older than Doubt, and he speaks in complete forms. "I'll prepare a CPA letter referencing prior K-1s and 1099s issued to you, plus a simple timeline of tax payments from your accounts," he said. "Neutral wording only. We agreed on bullets by year amount, paid source account, parcel or building check or wire reference. Do you want any adjectives?" he asked. "None," I said. He laughed softly. "Good. Adjectives invite arguments." He sent a consent form and a template. I signed immediately. He promised a draft at 3. The courier thumped on my door a little after 1. The envelope carried weight out of proportion to its size, dense with letterhead certainty. I slid the banker's letter into the front of my red binder and printed a second copy for the back in case quick hands at the reading flipped too fast. The business center smelled like toner and plastic. I added 2 tabs with steady hands, ownership and payments timeline in red, and conduct family communications in gray. The email thread sat at the back of the gray section behind a plain cover sheet so it would not lead. Facts first, conduct only if needed. At 3 o'clock, Atif's draft arrived exactly as promised. Dates, forms, amounts, sources tight as a drum. He kept the verbs cool, prepared, issued, verified, never believe. I printed it, clipped it behind the taxes, and felt the binder take on the weight of my own name. On the desk, the stack looked unremarkable, which is what you want when the thing you bring is authority and not performance. I set my phone face down and let the room return to ordinary sounds, a cart in the hallway, the faint chuff of the vent. I breathed in and out until my ribs stopped holding their breath. Near dusk, an unknown number tried twice. I let it ring and stop, then powered the phone to silent and placed it in the drawer. I poured water into a glass and stood at the window while traffic rose from the street like steam. I thought of the dishwasher hum in my kitchen, of being told to pack, of the word okay leaving my mouth like a key. I pictured tomorrow's room chairs, a conference table, a pitcher of water, the polite coughs of people waiting for money, and felt my shoulders lower by degrees. I laid out a dark dress, checked the binder zipper, and set 2 alarms for morning. Tonight before bed, I opened the binder and wrote a 1-page chronology year tax source minute. I added a note at the top, facts first, no speeches. I sealed the forwarded thread inside a manila sleeve and wrote the date on its tab. The banker's letter sat on top like a clean title to my own name. I set 2 alarms, one for the courier receipt, one for the meeting. Then I sat still long enough to feel the anger pass through like a weather front, leaving clear air behind it. I placed my driver's license with my maiden name beside it. I turned off the lamp and lay down facing the door, the way a person does when she refuses to be startled anymore. Tomorrow the room would be full and the paper would be allowed to speak. I would listen. And when words tried to bend, I would set them back on their hinges. I arrived 10 minutes early and took the chair that let me see the whole length of the table. Barry sat at my left, uncapped his fountain pen, and aligned it with his legal pad. Nora placed a slim recorder by my right hand and tapped the red dot to be sure. Across from us, the opposing side filtered in Johnny at the head with his yellow pad. Carol centered Eric and Lyle. On one flank, Lacey on the other. Water glasses made small rings on coasters. I breathed in, breathed out, and chose silence. Johnny began with preliminaries, voice even the kind you hear on airplanes before takeoff. Before we turn to the trust, there is a no-contest acknowledgement to be signed by all who wish to receive under it. Barry did not move his head, only his eyes. For the record, we ask that each sign an individual receipt and acknowledgement now. The paralegal set the stack in front of me first. I signed without comment. Lacey read the paragraph twice. Lyle hesitated. Carol scoffed. Eric signed last, not looking up. The paralegal slipped each original into a dated envelope and wrote our names in a careful block hand. Pens clicked shut like tiny gavels. Pages turned. The first sections named charities Lamar had supported for years, a scholarship at the community college, a small fund for the church pantry. The children's gifts were modest, fixed and free of conditions. No one spoke. I could hear a shoe touch the chair leg and stop. A throat cleared and quieted. Carol's jaw moved like she was working a stone. My glass of water stayed full. I kept my eyes on the paper and let the words move at their chosen speed. Grief walked beside me, but I did not hold it out for them to clutch or reject. Barry gave a small nod. I slid the red binder forward and placed it where the overhead light could find the seals. Ownership and payments timeline Nora said not to persuade, but to index. She read dates and instruments as if calling roll deed transfers, reassessment notices, property tax receipts, wire confirmations, minutes naming me managing member and K1s, tying income and obligations to my name. No adjectives, only months, numbers, parcel IDs. The embossed county seals caught the light like coins laid on felt. Johnny's questions came in a measured volley. Any commingling of funds? Any undue influence in the transfer of management? Barry answered with citations and page numbers. See Exhibit B minutes of September. Exhibit F reassessment. Funds drawn from Ms. Morrison's account ending 9/1/31. Nora held 2 tabs at once. K1s to Ms. Morrison for these years. 1099s issued to her. Tax payments traced by wire. I said nothing. Carol tried to interject. Johnny lifted a hand. Process only. The recorder blinked once and then steadied. The room settled into the sound of paper, doing what it does when you let it. After the last tab, Johnny straightened the stack in front of him and returned to the trust. Residual and remainder, he read. To the spouse, Lorena Morrison, absolutely and without restriction. The air did not move for a moment. I closed the binder softly and set my watch square to the table's edge. For clarity, I said access to the house will be orderly. 72 hours by notice, noon to sunset supervised. No triumph. Carol's eyes found mine and tried to grapple. I let the look pass by. Eric stared at a point on the table where the grain swirled like a fingerprint. Lyle leaned back then forward, then stopped moving. Lacey pressed her lips until the color thinned. Barry wrote a single line and capped his pen. Nora slid a blank template toward me labeled Notice and left it untouched. Johnny cleared his throat once the professional kind. Acknowledged on the record, he said. The air returned to ordinary temperature. We stood. Chairs made a soft, rubbery sound as they returned to the table. In the corridor, carpet pulled the noise out of our steps. Eric said my name like he had rehearsed it. Mom, Lorena. I waited. About the house you will receive written notice, I said, and gave him the window 3 days noon to sunset supervised access only. He nodded without argument. I did not offer comfort or cruelty. Barry pressed the elevator button. We stepped in, just us two, Binder at my side. The mirror showed 2 people who knew exactly where they were going. The elevator chimed at the lobby. Light off the marble floor made a clean path to the street. I felt the square weight of the binder against my palm and the steadier weight of my name inside it. Outside, taxis nosed past the awning, indifferent and exactly on time. I thought of the dishwasher's hum at home and how a hum can swallow a person if she lets it. Today, the hum belonged to a small recorder that had done its job. I had too. I would not explain and I would not instruct. The notice would do that. At the curb, Barry asked if I wanted coffee. No, I said. I want the notice out by 4. He smiled without showing teeth. It will be. We crossed with the light. My shadow moved with me, not ahead and not behind. A small thing, but I counted it. At the corner, I lifted my wrist and set the watch by the radio clock in a passing car. 72 hours is more than a number when you enforce it. It is dignity measured in daylight. You will receive written notice 72 hours, I had said, closing the binder as the recorder clicked off. Now I said nothing at all and let the doors part for me. Fluorescence made everyone a shade paler, even the oak benches. I sat with the red binder on my knees and watched its edge until my breath matched the slow blink of the docket screen. Barry reviewed our exhibit list, one finger tracing titles. Nora retabbed a section labeled Minutes, the plastic tongues clicking into place. Across the hall, Carol leaned into Johnny, whispering while watching me. I kept my palms flat on the cover to quiet the small tremor. The bailiff opened the door to part 12, and the room trimmed everyone down to size. The microphone popped once. The judge took the bench without ceremony. Johnny stood first. We moved for an emergency temporary restraining order. He said, cadence polished. There is risk of dissipation and interference, your honor and concerns of elder influence. He gestured toward me and did not meet my eyes. Barry wrote 3 words on his pad fax, dates, sources, then capped his pen and waited. My name sounded different under a ceiling that hummed. I kept my face neutral and placed the notice template on the empty chair beside me. When the judge turned to Barry, his voice dropped into the register he uses for porcelain and engines. We're here on a death. Not a fire, he said. Ms. Morrison will refrain from extraordinary transfers. Ordinary bills continue. We seek order, not advantage. I nodded once. The judge's gaze moved from me to the binder and back as if weighing it. Nora stood spine straight. She did not perform. She pointed. Deed history reassessments. Property, tax receipts, wire confirmations, K-1s, 1099s, and the LLC minutes naming Ms. Morrison managing member for years. She said each phrase paired with a page. The clerk initialed copies as Nora laid them down, the thud of rubber stamps landing like a metronome. No adjectives, only dates, amounts, parcel IDs, meeting times. I let the room hear what paper sounds like when it tells the truth. Johnny tried a narrow lane. Any evidence of commingling, any transfers after the date of death. Nora tapped 2 lines with a capped pen. Separate accounts. No. Ordinary payments, only utilities insurance. Barry added a citation and sat. I did not move. Carol shifted, then stilled as if the air had become heavy water. Somewhere behind us, a chair squeaked, then stilled. Judge Inez leaned forward, hands folded. 2 questions, she said. Notice to the children of today's access plan, Barry answered verbally yesterday. Written notice prepared. Commingling none. The judge nodded. The emergency is not shown. Application denied. Her clerk stamped a short form order. The ink settled to the word denied in a font that makes no promises. I adopt counsel's voluntary conditions as a stipulation, no extraordinary transfers. Ordinary bills continue. Air turned bearable. I loosened my grip on the binder and felt the blood come back to my fingers. In the corridor, Barry smiled with his eyes all he permits at work. Clerk's window, Nora said, already walking. We filed a written consent memorializing the prior minutes, updated the registered agent and the notice address, and corrected a stale mailing 3 zip codes away. I signed in blue so copies showed the original. On the courthouse steps, the columns cast shadows like sundials. Barry drafted the access notice from his phone, while I watched a school group pass their whispers, rising like birds banking away. We set the window 72 hours noon to sunset supervised civil standby available. I texted the notice to Eric with a line that was not apology and not triumph, for your planning. He read it and wrote back one word, understood. I saved the thread to the conduct tab. A deputy parked at the curb and idled, waiting for another matter. He looked at us as if measuring weather, not people. I studied the courthouse door one last time. The morning had not made me bigger. It had made the facts taller. The binder felt less like armor and more like a spine. Locks at dusk on the 3rd day, Barry said. I'll have the locksmith and the deputy will have the list. I nodded. We do what we say. We say only what we can do. Back in the car, I set the paper order on the passenger seat and buckled it in out of habit. The belt clicked, surprising a laugh out of me. The laugh ended quickly, not because laughter was forbidden, but because I had work. I dictated a voicemail to the insurance agent confirming no changes and slid the premium receipt into the binder's payment section. I texted Nora a photo of the stamped order and got back a blue check. Road lines stitched themselves under the hood. At a long light, I thought of the night I left the house with 2 suitcases and a sealed envelope I would not open until a hotel door latched behind me. Grief is a real weight. So is clarity. They can travel in the same carry-on if you pack carefully. The light turned green. I drove. That afternoon, I made 2 additional calls, bank and CPA, to confirm the voluntary guardrails on record. No speeches, just logs, date time, who spoke what was agreed. My handwriting looked steadier than it had a week ago. It is mercy when a hand learns what a voice refuses to spend. I set calendar reminders for the locksmith and deputy, then placed the order atop the binder and faced the door while I breathed through 10 slow counts. The stamped word denied, dried to a dull, honest gray as I hit send on the 72-hour notice. Patrol lights painted the brick blue and red as dusk settled over the eaves. A cruiser idled at the curb, steady as a metronome. Deputy Colby stepped out, checked the brass numbers, then the stamped notice I handed over. He read every line, lips moving once on the words, civil standby, and nodded. 15 minutes grace if needed. No disputes. Everyone stays on the sidewalk tone of voice. I let him do the explaining. Authority sounds better when it isn't mine. Inside, the house smelled like cardboard and lemon oil. Carol and Lyle were taping cartons at the dining table, strips snapped tight as bandages. Lacey held a silver frame against her chest knuckles, white around a photo. Eric hovered in the doorway, eyes landing everywhere but me. Personal effects only I said, pointing to the laundry room where I'd marked a staging area with painter's tape. Clothes, toiletries, devices. Nothing fixed to walls. I kept my sentences short enough to leave no edges. We moved like clerks. Deputy Colby stood by the island while I initialed a checklist. Winter coats, shoes. A toiletry bag, the laptop that hasn't left my desk in years. Car keys came back across the counter. Garage remotes dropped into a metal tray with a small, satisfying clink. One drawer check revealed a missing spare. The deputy asked for it without changing tone. Eric swallowed, reached into his pocket, and placed the key in the tray. We wrote it down. We did not narrate feelings. Carol tried to stall. Her jewelry roll isn't here, she said, aiming the words like a test. I met her look and answered once. Not required tonight. The hallway clock ticked with the patience of old houses. The deputy checked his watch. 8 minutes left, he said neutrally, as if reading weather. Lacey slipped the frame into a box and taped it shut with care that made my throat tighten, not from sentiment, but from the memory of how quiet people can be when they're afraid of sound. Ramon wheeled in his kit at the window's edge. The deputy stepped aside to let him through and announced, "Lock change will occur at time." I texted Eric a copy of the receipt address for later pickups and watched the new keypad come out of its blister pack instruction sheet folded like a paper bird. The hallway dimmed toward evening. The dining room chandelier flicked itself into reflection in the window, a ghost room where we used to stand shoulder to shoulder and pass plates without looking down. Boxes rolled to the porch, trunks eased open. The deputy escorted 2 loads to the cars and wrote badge numbers on the field card for anyone who wanted them. The minute turned. Ramon slid the old cylinder free, seated the new one, and set the tiny screw with an exacting patience that made the sound stand out all the more. It was not loud. It was distinct, a single mechanical clack. The keypad chirped as he coded a temporary entry. I entered mine after 4 digits I could remember even in grief. We walked the first floor once more, not as tourists, but as people who pay the electric bill. Thermostat at 68. Water shutoff tag still dangling from the copper. Study door locked. The deputy watched me test it and then signed my log. I signed his field card carbon paper, accepting the scratch of my pen. In the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed the same low note that had hidden voices on the day of the funeral. Tonight, it was only a machine doing a job, not a wall between me and the life I paid for. Tail lights slid away in pairs until the drive was a mirror again. The cruiser eased off the curb after a nod from the deputy. Ramon packed the last of his tools and left a sticker beside the hinge Service Date Company. Number warranty note that would mean little to anyone not watching their own perimeter. I stood at the threshold, breathed once to let the cold in, and closed the door behind me with my own hand. The silence that followed did not accuse. It rested. In the foyer, I set the signed field card under a paperweight on the console table and checked the keypad once more. The house felt smaller and safer, like a coat that finally fit. I walked to the kitchen and turned off the chandelier reflection, leaving only the under-cabinet lights I'd installed, because I prefer to see where the knives are. On the way back to the front door, I paused by the study and touched the knob. Locks are not revenge. They are boundaries you can hear. I texted buried change complete. Deputy witnessed. Keys accounted. He replied with a thumbs up and a time for tomorrow's broker call. I poured water into a glass and drank it standing at the sink, the way I once did while waiting for the children to come home late and safe. I set the glass down and let my shoulders drop. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and stopped as if even it understood that the line had been drawn and would hold without my vigilance. The keypad chirped acceptance of the new code, and the house exhaled as the patrol car's glow faded from the bricks. On the console, the written notice lay beneath the paperweight like a finished equation date time initials witness. I set a reminder to meet Amber at 10, then laid the spare fob in a drawer that locked with a simple push. Grief did not leave. It organized itself and took a chair. I walked the front hall, once finger-tracing the paint, Nick by the banister from the year Lyle learned stairs. Memory didn't argue with justice. It simply learned the new path home. Now. Amber called at 10 on the dot. "I only take instructions from the titled owner. Are you available at 10? She repeated, brisk. "I'm available now," I said, setting the deed printout on the counter beside my yellow pad. "We confirmed the LLC on the deed and my role as managing member. Policy saves argument." My breath steadied. She arrived with a measuring wheel and a calm that did not need to posture. Our walk began outside Gutter's clear brick joints, tight roof age noted on an invoice. Inside, she moved room to room with a checklist, cadence, smoke, and CO detectors, GFCI test, HVAC tags, tankless water heater service date. "Disclosures are straightforward," she said, glancing at the tax bill. "Owner of record is the LLC. Occupancy rights have ended by notice good paper." Her phone lit mid-tour. "Unknown Westchester," she said. I nodded permission for speaker. Amber speaking. Carol's voice arrived, cooled for business. "Freeze the listing. There are family issues." Amber's tone stayed even. "I can't take direction from non-owners. If counsel wants to copy me, I'm glad to note concerns." Silence, then a clipped, "We'll see." The call ended. A minute later, my inbox chimed message recall requested. The banner that followed was a small square truth. Recall failed. We sat at the kitchen island to finish intake. Amber slid over the MLS sheet. I initialed each disclosure line I could sign honestly. She added a Friday photo slot, a tentative open date pending my nod, and set the lockbox on the counter in a sealed bag. Owner code inside. "I'll email a broker opinion this afternoon," she said. "It will reflect the market." Not holiday table numbers. Next, the other property. I called Dean, our Soho manager. "Dean, this is Lorena stepping in as managing member." He asked for a letter of direction. 20 minutes later, the DocuSign chimed rent remittances to a dedicated operating account. W-9 under my LLC, tenants to receive a Friday notice titled Payment Instructions. We scheduled a board call for next week to replace the building's emergency contact. "Smooth transitions keep elevators moving," Dean said. I agreed. Shannon from the bank picked up on the second ring. We opened a sub-account for rents and enabled alerts that would buzz my phone if anything larger than utilities tried to move. Positive pay was turned on, read-only access for the CPA, approved payees locked to owner only. She read back beneficiary lists and waited for my yes. I answered each one and wrote the date beside my notes. I entered the two-factor codes. Guardrails don't keep you from driving, they keep you from drifting. Atif's email arrived after lunch. The letter on CPA letterhead confirmed the historic K1 1099 trail to me and summarized the tax payments made from my accounts to county and state. Neutral language throughout a timeline attached for any lender or broker who preferred numbers to opinions. He added vendor 1099 procedures under my EIN so that year-end would not become a scavenger hunt. I filed the PDF behind ownership operations and wrote, "Thank you," without adjectives. Amber's opinion of value landed at 4. The number matched the comps and ignored the legend my children traded when they were bored or ambitious. She suggested a few pre-listing repairs I already knew were due, a cracked outlet cover in the master, and a touch-up of peeling paint by the rear door. She locked the photo window for Friday, reserved a sign install, and asked for permission to place a lockbox. "Yes," I said, "owner code only." She slid the sealed bag across the counter. Between calls, the house made domestic noises. Ice maker distant furnace a single creak from the landing where Lamar used to pause. I emailed confirmations of Friday windows to Amber, Shannon, Atif, and Dean, each note concise and dated. PDFs went into the binder's new section operations. Eric texted, "Can we talk?" I replied with a time next week and copied Barry. At 5:30, I set the lockbox bag in the study safe and checked the keypad with the new code. The light blinked acknowledgement. In the hallway, the air felt cooler. My phone lit with a group text from Carol family meeting tonight. I typed a single line and attached a PDF, stamped with the hour all future communications in writing. Amber's sealed lockbox rested on the counter, small as a lunch pail and twice as useful. I poured tea and sat at the table with my yellow pad to list tomorrow's tasks, vendor bids, photos, tenant notices, the quiet things that build a future. I felt the old ache of missing what I'd been told I had a family that would not turn meetings into ambushes. The ache no longer ran the meeting. Paper did. I washed the cup and set it upside down to dry. Outside, the early dark of the river valley came in fast, and the windows turned to mirrors again. I checked the front and side doors, then walked back to the kitchen and switched off the under-cabinet lights. The house clicked softly as it cooled. I left my phone on the counter face down. When it chimed again, I did not look. Before bed, I filed Amber's comps under Valuation Save Dean's tenant notice and set phone alerts for thresholds. Shannon's confirmation pinged. Positive pay. Active ACH filters locked. Order not volume was the point. Amber had slid the sealed lockbox across the counter. Moments later, a group text from Carol lit my screen, "Family meeting tonight." At 7:14 p.m., my phone blinked twice and sang its small chime. A group text lit the screen, "Carol family meeting tonight, 7:45, at the house." The period after each sentence felt like a small gavel. I opened my laptop and dropped a single line into a PDF I had ready for this very moment. All future communications must be in writing. I attached the judge's short-form order from yesterday, the broker's policy sheet, and my counsel on copy. I sent it to the same thread with a steady thumb and set the phone face down. They came anyway. Headlights scissored across the brick and 3 shadows stacked on my stoop. I did not open the door. The intercom has always sounded tinny, but tonight it was clean as glass. Email only, I said. If you want a live conversation, propose an agenda in writing, and I will arrange a room and a reporter. The porch light drew a hard white stripe across the steps, cutting their shoes in half. Someone shifted. Someone sighed. The bell rang again. I kept my hands by my sides and waited for their footsteps to back away. At 8:03, a neighbor forwarded a screenshot from the neighborhood app, a post stuffed with grievance and heavy verbs. "She's forcing us out," it read above a photo cropped to hide the deputy's shoulder patch. I answered once and only once through Barry. He sent a short letter to the poster and the platform. "Please remove defamatory statements. Attached are the notice and the court's order denying emergency relief." By 8:27, the post sat behind a gray banner removed by moderator. Facts are not loud, but they carry. Amber's voicemail arrived before 9. She had pulled the recording off her office system and sent it as an attachment with a tidy note, "For your records." In the audio, Carol's voice put on Important's co-owner cancel photographs, stop the listing, and Amber's policy became the answer I only take instruction from the titled owner. Caller ID captured the number. The metadata stamped the minute. I saved the file, exported the details, and slid both into the Binders tab, labeled Conduct Third Parties. I wrote one email to my children. 3 bullet points, no paragraphs longer than 4 lines, documents linked rather than attached. First, no meetings at the residence. Second, operations proceed per title and written contracts already in place. Third, if you want a mediated session, propose times for next week. A reporter will be present and everyone will receive a transcript. I kept the tone plain. I did not explain what I had sacrificed. I did not paste old photographs to make a point. The send button glowed and then went quiet. The dishwasher hummed again. I heard the match note from the first day the same frequency, but tonight it lived in a different house. I clicked the lamp off in the front room, left the hall light on, and set the little plastic earbuds on top of my phone in case the night stretched. 2 unknown numbers tried for my attention. I let them pass the way a tide passes a rock that doesn't move. A calendar square opened in my app like a small window. I named it Patio Table 9:30 and bought myself 8 hours of ordinary sleep. Morning leaned over the cafe patio, sunlight slipping through the ironwork like a hand through lace. Eric arrived without the others, wearing the kind of expression men choose when they are not ready to be forgiven and decide to try telling the truth instead. He held his paper cup like a petition. "I froze," he said. That night in the kitchen, I froze. I nodded once so he would not have to explain the physics of shame. "You and I can speak," I said. "Decisions stay written." He let out a long breath that sounded like a truce with himself. We spoke for 15 measured minutes about boxes, about work, about the way grief bends, clocks until noon feels like dusk. He did not ask for money. I did not offer any. When he faltered, I did not fill the space with comfort. When he asked whether I could meet with all of them, I pointed to the rule that protects us not from each other, but from our worst habits. "Send an agenda," I said. "We will meet with a mediator and a recorder in a room that does not belong to any of us." He looked down at his sleeve and nodded. He asked what made me set the house in order so quickly. I told him the truth. The house is a structure. A family is a structure. Both fail when no one tends to the beams. I told him his father left paper instead of speeches, and that I had finally decided to do the same. He watched the answer land in the middle of the table, like a folded map. "I want to do better," he said, and the sentence came out like a beginning, not an oath. I wrote a date on my napkin and slid it across to him, the ink feathering at the edge. Back home, I filed the impersonation voicemail, the screenshot of the removed post, and the simple cafe receipt behind their tabs. The binder closed with its familiar zipper sound, not a flourish, not a slam. The house ticked in the quiet refrigerator, cycling heat, settling the rough little breath of an old vent making its case. I sent the Mediator's calendar invite to Eric and copied counsel. Then I sat still long enough to know that I could sit still and that this too was action. Choosing not to perform is still a choice. Outside, the maple lifted its black lace against a sky. I rinsed my cup, wrote today's date on a sticky note and set it on the binder's spine. Noted. Logged. No scenes, steps. And Grace's conference room was glass and quiet, a bowl of peppermints on the credenza, and a sand timer no one touched. I sat between Barry and Nora with my binder closed, palms flat, wedding band turned inward. Grace reviewed the rules in a careful voice, one person at a time, evidence before feelings, no interruptions, all notes collected when we were done. I agreed to speak last. It has become a skill of mine waiting until paper has cleared its throat. She invited the others to make brief openings. Lyle leaned back as if the chair owed him something. Lacey folded her hands and stared at a nick in veneer. Eric sat straighter than I had seen in months. Carol went first. This feels like financial erasure, she said, smoothing a sleeve that did not need smoothing. Lyle talked about family equity, the phrase he uses when math offends him. Lacey said our pastor would have wanted fairness. I wrote 3 bullets and watched the sand fall grain by grain. At 10:30, the door cracked open. A courier in a navy jacket asked for me by full name, checked my driver's license, and set a manila envelope on the table. He logged the time, the envelope number, and left without looking at anyone else. Chain of custody neat as a nurse's chart. I did not open it. I slid it toward Grace. Grace put on reading glasses. She broke the seal, studied the first page, and read the heading aloud so it would live in the record letter of intent. Lamar J. Morrison, dated 4 years before his diagnosis, notarized the seal raised like a thumbprint in wax. She did not perform it. She summarized the bones. Lamar affirmed that the Westchester house belonged to my LLC and that he held only a right to live there during his lifetime. He listed the Soho building and 2 smaller parcels, and he reaffirmed that the operating companies were managed by me. Finally, he addressed what the children kept saying out loud, a small life insurance policy already named them in equal shares outside the estate and outside any trust. No one is cut off, he wrote. Respect the structure your stepmother built. No one moved. I could hear the soft rattle of the air vent and the hard silence people make when a myth dies. My throat did not rise. I thought of the day I sent the first property tax wire, how Lamar kissed my wrist and said, "You always were the adult in the room." Verification. Grace said, looking at me and then at Barry. Nora placed her phone in the center speaker on. Atif answered on the second ring. In the same calm cadence he uses for April deadlines, he confirmed the pattern in our filings. K-1s to me, 1099s to me. Property taxes drawn from my accounts all years, matching the dates in the letter. While we listened, he forwarded header metadata for the CPA email. Grace printed and stapled it to the packet herself, the stapler's click, crisp as a gavel. Received 10:58 a.m. She read from the footer and set page beneath the clip. Proof layered on proof, and none of it required my voice. Carol's voice broke the pause. People forge things, she said. Notaries get it wrong. She controlled him. Grace lifted a hand palm down. Exhibits only she said. No exhibit arrived. Barry, without temperature, cited the statute on notarization and the time gap before illness, then rested. I kept my hands folded. It has taken me a long time to learn that silence, when it is chosen, is not surrender. It is a tool. Grace turned the sand timer. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, "you asked to speak last." I nodded. "I will not discuss feelings today," I said. "I will discuss structure." I proposed an education trust for the grandchildren funded by operating income after reserves administered by a third-party trustee. Disbursements would be for tuition and accredited programs only with receipts required. As conditions, I asked for written apologies for impersonation and defamation, owner-only operations going forward, and a commitment to route every request in writing through counsel. No meetings at the house, no keys passed around, no entry without a written appointment and my approval. Mercy belongs to children, not to chaos. Eric's chair creaked. He did not look at me, only at the sand. Lyle's foot kept time with nothing. Lacey swallowed. Carol stared at the peppermint bowl as if it might give instructions. Grace wrote quickly, then read the terms back clean. No garnish. She set the yellow evidence folder on top of the packet with Lamar's letter inside like a spine in a back that had just stood up straighter. We broke at noon. The hallway smelled faintly of copier toner and someone's citrus cologne. Barry leaned toward me. "The letter bought quiet," he murmured. I shook my head once. "The truth did," I said, and slid the envelope into my red binder. Outside the city noon had that washed silver look it gets after rain. Elevators chimed and shoes whispered. I was almost to the lobby when my phone buzzed with a hospital number I knew too well. "He's asking for you," the nurse said when I answered. Her voice was professional and kind. For a second I saw the fluorescent wash of an emergency room and felt the chill of a plastic chair. I told her I was on my way. I tucked the binder under my arm and pressed the elevator button with my knuckle the way you do when you have washed your hands too much in 1 week. When the doors opened, my reflection stood beside me. Small and straight, the band turned inward, the red spine, visible like a steadying rail in a moving car. Mercy General smelled like rain-soaked wool and antiseptic. I signed in under family, handed over my ID, and the registrar read the line that steadied and stung emergency contact Lorena. A blue wristband slid from the printer with my name clean across it. Charge nurse Dana clipped it to my sleeve like a small duty. Fluorescents buzzed. Monitors chattered behind winter-colored curtains. I tucked my binder under my arm, breathed like a swimmer, and followed the quiet river of beeps. Eric lay behind curtain 8, left leg splinted, shoulder strapped. Machines made soft oceans around him. He looked smaller than 35 loose socks, hair flattened at the crown. Dana frowned at a field on the chart. "Spouse unreachable," she said, writing it in careful block letters. Eric cleared his throat. "I asked for you." He whispered, not quite a question. I pulled a chair close, but not his hand, and let the machines keep time for us. He did not start with a case, and I was grateful. That night, he said eyes on the bed rail. I froze. I let anger do the talking. I thought I was protecting something. The drip chamber counted his silence. I was wrong. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for keys. I listened with my hands folded and my eyes on his face, not the cast. The beeps steadied into a background, human enough to forgive, not enough to forget. When I spoke, I used small words. The truth fits inside. "You didn't just hurt me, Eric. You erased me." I named events the way a clerk stamps them, the 72-hour notice, the deputy's field card, the intercom at my own door while you stood on my porch as if I were the stranger. He nodded hard, tears quick and unperformed. "I want to rebuild," he said, voice finding floor. Dana's pen paused, then moved. The room held the hush brave choices make. Boundaries are medicine, so I wrote them into his discharge plan. "You keep your studio," I said. "I will book physical therapy and 1 therapist intake. All logistics in writing. No access to my accounts, no address keys. And there will be an apology letter to me and to the broker for any impersonation by anyone in the family." He nodded, wiped his face like a boy who had forgotten he was not one, and asked for a week. "You have it," I said. "If you miss the steps, we pause." Social worker. Miguel arrived the way good help does soft shoes clear folders. He confirmed a ride voucher prescription timing and a PT slot 2 mornings from now. He added a community fund for co-pays. I shook my head at the money piece. He'll apply himself, I said. I'll print forms and stay on the call. A text from Barry buzzed good. Document the terms. I took a picture of the checklist with the blue wristband in frame and sent it back. Filed, he replied. We had 5 quiet minutes while radiology called for someone else. I slipped off the wristband and set it on his tray so he could see the printed name proof of the sentence at the desk. We did not reach for a new language. We spoke weather and the grocery across the street that still stacks his favored seltzer by the door. He told a joke Lamar used to tell badly. I smiled for a man who is not in the room anymore and yet keeps lending me lines to survive my own scene. Resident Dr. Klein signed in with the energy of someone who still believes forms fix more than they do. He walked through the splint, the sling, the pain scale, and the schedule. He asked Eric to repeat the plan and watched him do it without checking my face. It mattered that the words came from his mouth. When the resident left, Eric took a breath that did not become a plea. I'll send the apology tonight, he said. Good, I answered. Spell my name right. He laughed once, small, honest, new. At the discharge desk, the insurance terminal blinked its slow, bureaucratic blink. Miguel stamped and slid papers across without drama. I added tomorrow's PT to my calendar and the therapist intake to the day after. No one used the word reconciliation. We used the language of practice, show up on time, bring your documents, write it down. Outside, the air cooled my wrists as if a door had opened where I needed one. On the sidewalk, I signed the visitor log, then checked messages beneath a tree that has learned to live with traffic. Amber offer coming in at ask. My breath went out like a curtain, letting light through. Eric, I'll send the letter tonight. I typed the therapist address with cross streets and the exact time, then put my phone away to listen to the ordinary chorus of buses and a child laughing at a pigeon that refused to scare. I tucked the blue wristband into my binder and walked toward the deck. There are women who measure love by how loudly they endure. I am not that woman anymore. I measure by the clarity of what I sign, the firmness of what I refuse, and the small, steady ways I show up when someone finally uses my name to ask. I will not negotiate in doorways or on stoops. I will help with rides and forms and calendars, because care is not the same thing as surrender. The house hums for me now. The binder fits my ribs like a rail. When the elevator doors slid open, I knew the offer would arrive before dark and that his email would begin. I was wrong, and here is my plan. I would accept that start and hold him to line in writing. I walked in with fear, and I walked out with terms. That is love grown up steady as paper. It will hold. I will. Sun rose thin and gold over the maples, and my inbox chimed once no fanfare, just a subject line that steadied me. Fully executed, congrats, Lorena. Amber's email held the signed offer at asking with proof of funds. I read it twice, once for numbers, and once for the peace that plain documents bring. I forwarded the packet to Barry and Atif. Atif replied within 3 minutes with settlement routing under my LLC, only the line I had insisted on from the first meeting. By 8:30, the title officer was on speaker, walking me through guardrails. Owner-only disbursement. Callback phrase on file. Shannon joined to add positive pay and a 2-person verification on any outgoing wire. I wrote the phrase on a small Post-it and slid it beneath my monitor where only I would know what it meant. No third-party instructions accepted. I said and heard each word become a hinge. We set noon for the closing. A bird tapped once at the window and moved on. Before 10, I signed the Grandchildren Trust. We drafted in mediation funded by building income, not principal, set to ignite on closing. It was mercy I could afford, and it did not drag me back into the old arguments that never learned to say thank you. Eric's email arrived a breath later, an apology to Amber, and to me, no excuses typed sober and clean. I filed it under conduct repaired. The folder felt like a small stitched seam in weathered cloth. Grace's conference room held the quiet of purposeful endings. We met to sign the cease and desist and non-disparagement to Inc. owner-only operations to staple metadata behind the packet. Barry slid pages toward them. Grace watched the clock. Carol hovered at the signature line, then pressed the pen down. Lyle and Lacey signed without commentary, eyes lowered in a way that looked like adulthood, at least for an afternoon. Grace read one more line from Lamar's letter, the one that steadied the room. 2 days earlier, the children were beneficiaries of a modest life policy he kept separate. Barry produced the carrier confirmation. A long-fed myth went quiet, the story that I had erased them to crown myself. They have theirs, I have mine, and the facts do not shout. They rest. On the neighborhood board, moderators pinned a factual post to replace last week's smear, the judge's denial order, the deputy's log from the 72-hour retrieval, the owner of record screenshot. The thread was short, no victory dance in the comments. A digital room exhaled. I closed the tab and felt the same stillness that comes after mopping a kitchen. The clean is its own ceremony. At the title office, signatures multiplied the way snow does quiet and decisive. The buyers signed. I initialed where tabs told me. The closer said funded and Shannon's system chimed. Wire received. Owner-only routing confirmed. Amber slid a small envelope across the table, not heavy enough to matter. Inside lay the last garage remote. Keep it, she said. A souvenir, not a key. I thanked her for following policy when feelings ran hot. Policy saved me from speeches. On my drive south, I called Dean. He reported the roofer's schedule and the elevator permit renewal details that keep a building honest. When I reached Soho, dusk had started its patient work. We climbed to the roof. Across the street, lights flicked on behind windows I owned by name and effort, not by marriage or myth. The rent roll hummed in my head like the dishwasher in my kitchen, an appliance with a new song. Wind caught my hair, and order settled in my bones. I slipped the blue ER wristband from my wallet and Lamar's notarized letter from its sleeve, and tucked both into the red spine binder that has traveled with me through rooms where people raised voices to drown paper they did not want to read. The binder did what I needed it to do. It let me keep my voice for sentences that matter. Please, thank you, no. My phone buzzed again. The title officer's confirmation PDF, then Amber's line, "Congratulations, Lorena." I texted Eric the closing photo and the start date for the Grandchildren Trust. He replied with a period and a heart, as if argument had given way to punctuation. There will be ordinary fights ahead, a boiler that sulks a tenant who mistakes grace for permission, a memory that drifts in with the smell of Lamar's aftershave when I pass a certain doorway. Quiet does not erase. It arranges. I have learned the worth of an agenda. A stipulation, a lock that answers only to the hands that pay to keep it. I have learned to stand on a threshold and listen for the single clack that tells me a chapter is closed. When the city lights rose across my own windows, I understood what Lamar left that outruns any wire: the right to choose quiet over spectacle facts, over pleading, and a name I do not have to explain. That is my inheritance. It fits. It holds. It isn't a secret. It is a practice. I gathered the binder under my arm and watched the building breathe. I said nothing the day he died about the 35 million or the rest of what they thought they knew. I say this now because the story is finished. I kept faith with the woman I was before them and the owner I became among them. Mercy, where I can afford it. Boundaries, where I must. And peace earned, kept and shared in the small ways that last longer than applause. I locked the roof door and felt the day set like a map now. Looking back, I realized this story was never just about money or property. It was about dignity, boundaries, and the quiet strength we sometimes forget we still carry. When my children pushed me aside, I learned that silence can be more powerful than shouting, and paper often speaks louder than wounded hearts. To my American friends watching this, protect your name, your choices, and the values you've built. What about you? Have you ever had to stand firm for your own peace, even when it meant saying less instead of more? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this touched your heart, type 1 below, or let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't agree with this journey, tell me why your voice matters too. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Together, we'll keep learning, growing, and proving that we are never too old to protect what truly matters.